Tell me of your travels. Next one is on me. May the mists protect you.
Greetings! You have a great day now. Interesting.
That spell is not ready yet. No, I cannot do that yet. That ability is not ready yet. I cannot cast that yet. That is still recharging. I cannot cast that yet. Not ready yet. I cannot do that yet. Not enough energy. I do not have enough energy. Not enough energy. That ability is not ready yet. That spell is not ready yet. Not ready yet. I cannot do that yet. That ability is not ready yet. I cannot do that yet. That ability is not ready yet. I do not have enough energy. Not enough energy. I do not have enough energy. Not enough energy. I do not have enough energy. Not ready yet. That ability is not ready yet. I cannot do that yet. Not ready yet. That ability is not ready yet.
Your rage sustains me.
Hello. Hello. There is no hurry.
Looking for something specific? Safe travels. Hello, man. Spirits be with ya, man.
Oh, hello. Farewell.
Greetings, wanderer. Jade Serpent. Next one is on me. Browse. Take your time. Enjoy. Jade Serpent, guide me.
We survive.
Greetings. Farewell. Open for business. Light bless you.
From the length of time a body is in the water, you can figure out the distance the body traveled if you know the speed of the currents. Investigators got a huge break when they learned there was a dam a few miles upstream. When it opens, it significantly increases the water current.
In the 28-hour period between the time we believe Katie was put into the river to the time I found her, the dams had been closed off.
That meant that Katie's body entered the river, pretty much where she was found.
What are you looking for?
From the moment Katie Freshley's body was found in the Hillsborough River, police considered the home at 1503 East Mulberry Street as a possible crime scene. It was just 100 feet from where Katie's body was discovered. The young couple living there were shocked by what happened. They insisted they weren't home on the Friday afternoon the murder took place.
These people are oblivious to what could have potentially happened at their house.
You know, I'm kind of drawing a blank on my emotional state at that time, but no, I know I wasn't nearly as anxious as my girlfriend is, you know. I'm more of a realist person. It's just whatever's gonna happen is out of my control, out of her control. Just relax and let it take its course.
The home was a rental, and it was the landlord who told Katie's insurance company about the leaking roof. Taking matters into his own hands, Katie's father, Jeff Freshley, interviewed the landlord himself.
He said that he had sent her there, but he had never seen her or talked to her, and he acted, they thought, in a suspicious manner.
But the landlord provided an alibi.
He had a worker with him through the majority of the day of the 12th when Katie was known to have gone missing.
It's our belief that the landlord probably did not tell the renters that Katie or anybody else would be coming that day.
In a search for suspects, investigators decided to check Katie's credit card records to see if anyone used them after her murder. Admittedly, it was a long shot, since few criminals are that inept.
Sure enough, they were. At least 4 attempts. And of the 4 attempts, I think 1 was actually successful. And that led to a whole new avenue of evidence for us.
Investigators went to every location where Katie's credit cards had been used. One was a grocery store, and its surveillance video showed a white male about 6 feet tall using Katie's debit card. According to the clerk, the customer said the card belonged to his girlfriend. But instead of signing Katie's name, he signed his own. It was Jason Funk, the man renting the home on Mulberry Street.
We were almost shocked at his stupidity. I can't even recollect what he was thinking or how he thought he could get away with something so obviously stupid.
In Jason's backyard, investigators found what looked like a fire pit. There they found burnt hunks of carpet and a burnt belt buckle.
It most certainly was consistent with the style and the size belt that Katie would have had on that particular day.
Investigators moved inside the house. They noticed what looked like a bloodstain on the rear door frame. And on the living room ceiling, there was blood spatter.
And the realization that hit me as I was doing that was I really felt I was standing exactly in the spot where Katie Freshley had died in order for that blood to get up there.
Investigators also found a prepaid highway toll device with a serial number registered to Katie. And her business card was on a shelf above the oven.
And then you're claiming you've never met her before, you've never seen her before, and her business card is in your house? I mean, it's almost like leaving breadcrumbs. I mean, for heaven's sake.
Finally, investigators took the medical examiner's advice and looked for an item in the home that could have been the murder weapon. And in the living room, they found it. A 4-foot-long motorcycle muffler.
It was sanitized point. There were no discernible fingerprints and no obtainable blood evidence.
On the end of the muffler was a circular mounting bracket.
We would use this mounting bracket to attach the muffler onto a motorcycle.
The mounting bracket was measured and then laid over photographs of Katie's fatal wounds. The round outer edge of the bracket was the exact size of the blunt force injuries on Katie's head.
The circular portion on the muffler was the exact same size as the injury on her scalp and gave a lot of credibility to that being the murder weapon.
And during the interrogation, detectives noticed something on Jason's Nike sneakers.
When detectives were actually interviewing Tom, they noticed what appeared to be blood droplets on his Nikes.
A presumptive test indicated this was human blood. Then investigators remembered the bank envelope found in Katie's car. So they sprayed it with the chemical ninhydrin, which revealed an almost perfect set of prints. Katie's fingerprints were on the envelope, and so were Jason Funk's.
That told us scientifically that Jason Funk had been in Katrina Freshley's vehicle.
Jason Funk continued to deny he was in any way involved. He claimed he was on a jet ski in the river at the time of the murder.
If I would have been home that day instead of out on my jet ski, who's to say I couldn't have prevented this whole thing from happening?
There's nothing,
I cannot cast that yet.
no part of my life that hasn't been touched by this.
That spell is not ready yet.
Work, vacation, sports, fun, leisure time. It was a huge hole. And Kate was such a bright, happy, hard-headed sweetheart.
I
Just
cannot cast
irreplaceable.
that yet. That is still
They all,
recharging.
but
I
she
cannot
was.
cast that yet.
Prosecutors said they had conclusive proof that Jason Funk murdered Katie Freshley. As for motive,
That spell is not
Jason
ready
had
yet.
prior
I
convictions for
cannot
assaulting
cast that
women.
yet.
And 2 days before Katie's murder,
That is
Jason
still
had lost his
recharging.
job.
That spell
They
is
were
not
having
ready
money
yet.
problems. They had spent most of their
That is still
savings
recharging.
on the security deposit for this residence, so I think he was motivated by greed. That's my belief.
Watch, get her back.
Investigators know that Katie arrived at Funk's home because she told her co-worker on the phone that she found it. They believe it was Jason who approached her. When she went inside to inspect the roof damage, Jason was home alone.
What can I do for you?
His girlfriend Pam was at work. Prosecutors
Good day.
think Jason might have made a
Ain't
sexual
you a
advance.
shipper-looking one?
No one knows.
Let the light of
What the evidence shows is that he picked up the motorcycle muffler and struck Katie on the back of her head. This left the blood spatter on the ceiling and on his sneakers. As he exited the house with the body, Katie's blood stained the back door frame. The house was concealed enough that Jason could dump the body in the river without being seen. He abandoned Katie's car near a bar a mile away, handled the bank envelope looking for money, and took her cash and credit cards. He burned the blood-stained living room carpet and Katie's clothing in order to remove the evidence. He also cleaned the murder weapon, but he left so much other evidence, his efforts were hardly worth it. Using her credit card and signing his own name was a classic.
She was absolutely at the wrong place at the wrong time and fell victim to something that she should have never been victim of.
When you hear about cases like this, you want to think that, personally, I want to think the best of everyone, but it's difficult sometimes to do that when you see these things that have happened.
6 months after the murder, the forensic lab finished the DNA testing. The blood in Jason's home and on his sneakers was Katie Freshley's. The skin cells on the steering wheel of Katie's car were Jason's.
We put a piece of the puzzle together for the agency. We were able to match DNA from the victim to the crime scene. We were able to match DNA from the victim to the perpetrator's clothing.
Faced with a possible death sentence, Jason Funk agreed to plead guilty to the murder and in return was given a life sentence without parole.
I think it's a tragedy all the way around. It's a tragedy for him, it's a tragedy for our daughter, and a tragedy for us and his family.
Jason Funk still maintains he had nothing to do with the murder. He claims he only pled guilty to avoid the death sentence. The forensic evidence says otherwise.
The forensics in this case, it was key to bringing the murderer to justice. They all did just a tremendous job. We are forever grateful for the job that they did.
His denial of it was steadfast throughout the whole thing, and I don't believe without forensics, I'm not sure if we would have been able to convict him.
Tunica, Mississippi is the third largest gambling center in the United States. And that's where Shannon Sanderson and her second husband, Robert, loved to go. On April 19, 1996, Robert and Shannon planned a gambling trip to Tunica to celebrate Robert's 58th birthday. But at the last minute, Robert canceled.
He told her that his daughters from another marriage had come by and brought him a birthday cake, and he wanted to spend a little time with them. He wanted to delay their departure for Tunica, Mississippi.
The couple argued, but Robert decided to stay home. Shannon took her children from a previous marriage to the babysitter and went to the casino without him and played blackjack all night long. By the end of the evening, she had won $5,000.
She took $5,000 in cash. They tried to get her to take a check, but she wouldn't.
Shannon left the casino around 3 a.m., then drove to her babysitter's house to pick up her 3 children. When she got there, she was attacked. Her babysitters heard the commotion.
They saw somebody wearing a red ball cap, forcing her into a maroon Chevrolet Beretta.
And the car took off before anyone could intervene.
They found a fake fingernail that had been left during the struggle and a button from the dress that Shannon had been wearing. And they, of course, tagged that as evidence.
One of the neighbors was able to identify the assailant.
The neighbor said it was Shannon's husband driving a car.
When questioned by police several hours later, Shannon's husband, Robert, denied any involvement. He said his children stopped by for a small birthday party. After they left, he went to bed and was alone all night. Since there was no one to corroborate his alibi, police asked Robert to take a polygraph test.
His attorney wouldn't let him take the polygraph test and wouldn't let him give a statement to us, other than what he had already told the uniformed officers that made the scene the night of the kidnapping. So that kind of sent a red flag up, so we couldn't eliminate him.
A look into the couple's marriage revealed they were having their fair share of problems. It was a second marriage for both, and there was a 33-year age difference.
We had heard some reports from some family members that perhaps there was more trouble than usual with their marriage, that this argument they had on his birthday was not an isolated incident, that they had been fighting quite regularly.
If Robert Sanderson knew anything about his wife's disappearance, he wasn't talking. And police had no idea where she was. There were several witnesses to Shannon Sanderson's early morning abduction. One of them claimed that the assailant looked like Shannon's husband, Robert.
We had a witness that observed a maroon Beretta, and she identified the individual as Robert Sanderson. And that was the strongest piece of evidence that we had at that time.
Robert denied any involvement and said he didn't own a red Beretta. But Robert was one of the few people who knew where Shannon would be that evening.
And he was also an individual who had made a lot of money in the security business and would know things that you know, the average citizen on the street wouldn't know.
Amid rumors that there was trouble in the marriage, investigators also uncovered a possible financial motive.
Prenuptial agreement had been signed, was actually signed post-marriage, and it provided for, I believe he would have to have gotten her an apartment and paid her $10,000 if they were to divorce or if something was to happen to their marriage.
Robert had Shannon sign this agreement just 2 weeks before her disappearance.
It was a factor to consider and not something that hits the radar every time the Memphis Police Department is investigating a homicide or an abduction. It was something unusual.
Weeks passed, and there was no word from Shannon or her kidnapper. Family and friends distributed missing posters throughout town, and police asked the public to call if they had any information to offer. And police also questioned Shannon's ex-husband, Michael. The two had only been divorced for 1.5 years.
I had no idea what could have happened. One of the policemen told me I was a suspect. They questioned me for about a week straight down there at downtown Memphis.
Michael said he had an alibi, that he was at work at a chemical company on the night of the abduction, and police confirmed his story. Investigators also discovered there was another man in Shannon's life, Brett Muscamp, who dated Shannon briefly in between her divorce and subsequent marriage to Robert. Apparently, Muscamp was angry when Shannon dumped him.
there were some problems between he and Shannon Sanderson. He was calling and harassing. He was also following her around in her car. There was one incident where he blocked her car in and frightened her.
Shannon pressed criminal charges and obtained a restraining order against him. Like everyone else in the case, Muskamp denied any involvement in Shannon's disappearance.
The former boyfriend's alibi was his mother, that he was at home asleep, and his mother vouched for him, and it all seemed credible.
Hoping for a lead, police decided to track Shannon's movements on the night of her abduction, beginning with the Sam's Town Casino in Tunica, Mississippi. And once again, Robert Sanderson became the focus of the investigation. An assistant casino manager was sure he'd seen them together that night.
He remembered Shannon Sanderson and Robert Sanderson fighting, and he even went so far as to recall Shannon Sanderson crouched over in the corner of the casino and indicating that she was afraid of Robert Sanderson.
The casino manager also claimed that Robert Sanderson asked him to help provide an alibi.
He remembers Robert Sanderson coming back down to the casino after Shannon Sanderson's abduction and talking to Mr. Birchfield and saying, you know, I wasn't down here that night.
A month after Shannon's disappearance, a man found the remains of a body in a deserted farmhouse 40 miles away. Dental records confirmed that it was Shannon Sanderson.
Shannon was shot behind her ear, basically, one shot, which killed her, of course. Prior to that, she had been struck numerous times in the face. Her jaw was broken, I believe a tooth was knocked loose and another tooth cracked.
Shannon's $5,000 was missing, and so was her jewelry, leading some to suspect the motive was robbery. "25-year-old Shannon Sanderson was found murdered in a deserted farmhouse 40 miles away from her home. Shannon left behind 3 young children from her first marriage. At the time, they were just 3, 5, and 7 years old.
I tell them that she's a good person. She's a loving mom. She cared about them very, very much. And to this day, you know, she still cared about them. She cared about them until the rest of their life.
The prime suspect in the murder was her second husband, Robert, who was unable to provide a solid alibi for the night of her murder. A casino employee recalled seeing Robert at the casino that night with Shannon. A review of the casino's security cameras revealed Shannon Sanderson was there, but no sign of her husband, Robert.
We were able to determine that this particular night, there was no altercation and that Robert wasn't at Sam's Town, because we were able to go back and look at who she was with and when she left, if anyone was with her, and of course Robert wasn't there.
The investigation into Shannon's murder had been dragging on for weeks. During that time, police received numerous calls about the case. One of them came from a woman named Sharon Powers.
She called the Memphis Police Department and she said, my husband, Gerald Lee Powers, was at Sam's Town Casino the night that this woman was abducted. He was driving a maroon Beretta and he was wearing a red baseball cap. That's all she told the police.
A background check revealed 41-year-old Gerald Powers was an unemployed construction worker with a criminal past.
Gerald Lee Powers had a horrible criminal history of terrorizing women, one in which he jumped in the car of a woman that he didn't know, held her at knife point, threatened her. Somehow, miraculously, she was able to drive and escape. And there was another case where he broke into a woman's home, beat her with a skillet, stole money from her, and stole jewelry from her.
Powers had served 7 years in prison for the last assault, and police couldn't speak to him about Shannon's murder because he had disappeared. Police finally caught him a month later at the Mexican border, attempting to re-enter the United States.
They pulled him over Powers come out with a knife. The border agent drew his gun. Powers decided he wasn't going to take a knife to a gunfight and gave up.
Powers was driving a red Beretta, the same kind of car witnesses saw at Shannon's kidnapping. But Powers claimed he had an alibi for the night of Shannon's murder.
We weren't still sure that he had an involvement in it. He had told the officers that he went to visit a sick friend.
That friend, who lived 50 miles away from the casino in Clarksdale, corroborated his alibi. But in Powers' trunk, investigators found pieces of a fake fingernail with pink nail polish, similar to the fingernail found at the crime scene. So investigators took the unusual step of exhuming Shannon's body.
We needed to make sure that these were her fingernails that had been recovered.
Just as they suspected, Shannon did have fake nails glued onto her real fingernails, and they were sent to the forensic lab for comparison.
We were sent a number of artificial fingernails, one from the abduction site, one from the victim at autopsy, one from the suspect's trunk of his vehicle.
Under a microscope, the nail found at the abduction site matched the fake nails from Shannon's body. Unfortunately, the nail found in Gerald Powers' trunk was a different shape and painted a different color than Shannon Sanderson's nails.
The fingernail from the subject's trunk differed from the fingernails associated with the victim.
When we found out the nails didn't match, we were shocked.
You know, everybody just, well, it's going to match, it's going to match. It's got to match, but it didn't.
To find out if Gerald Powers was in Sam's Town Casino on the night of Shannon Sanderson's abduction, investigators asked casino management to screen their security videotapes once again.
We happened to get lucky because cameras that we were looking at are normally pointed at table games. In this incident, we had some table games that were getting ready for table drops. That's the collection of the money from the table games early in the morning. And a camera was left out of place, out of position.
That camera caught a partial image of a man wearing white sneakers standing on a balcony overlooking the blackjack table where Shannon Sanderson was playing. The man went down the escalator, past Shannon's blackjack table. At the cashier's window, Shannon collected her $5,000. Then, a casino security guard escorted her to the parking lot. The man followed Shannon out the door 30 seconds later. Most of the video was black and white, but he did walk past a color security camera. The baseball cap was red, and he looked like Gerald Powers.
I was pretty elated. It was a lot of work that we got this guy. It was, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of hours of reviewing time, very tedious. And when we did finally get our guy, it was a celebratory moment.
But prosecutors needed more evidence against Powers before walking into court and trying to get a conviction. And they didn't have any. Then, in a surprising twist, Gerald Powers' wife, Sharon, led police to the jewelry that had been stolen from Shannon Sanderson. Sharon claimed her husband, Gerald, told her where he hid it.
He told her that he had buried the jewelry behind the B&W lounge in an old abandoned couch. If she needed it for any purpose, there it was.
Just as Sharon said, the jewelry was there, wrapped in tin foil and pink saran wrap. In Powers' home, investigators found pink saran wrap similar to the type used to wrap Shannon's jewelry. In the forensic lab, scientists cut tiny slivers from each sample and subjected them to a process known as Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. Infrared light is passed through each sample. How much each one absorbs is then plotted on a graph. Both samples had the same composition, and the color of the cellophane looked the same. But the human eye can only differentiate 110 different colors. A microspectrophotometer can detect thousands, and that test was definitive.
It's my conclusion that the plastic wrap used to contain Shannon's jewelry was consistent with coming from the plastic roll recovered from the suspect's residence.
We were ecstatic. That was very compelling in our eyes, and we knew to the jury that that would be something very compelling.
Next, investigators did a thorough search of Powers' car.
Not having all the equipment like they do on CSI, vacuum cleaners and stuff, he went and purchased a lint brush, and he went over the whole car.
On the tape lift, one fiber stood out, an unusual black wool fiber.
I noticed that the dye was unevenly distributed across the wool fiber, kind of a mocha brown color in between, inside the wool fiber itself. So it had a kind of a unique dye distribution across the wool fiber.
Fibers from the black skirt Shannon was wearing when murdered were compared to this black fiber from Powers' car. Under a microscope, the fibers appeared to have the same uneven distribution of dye. Using a microspectrophotometer, scientists found no differences between the two. The wool fiber in Powers' car came from Shannon's skirt.
That's exciting. It's the reason most of us in the FBI are here. We want to find out the truth. And in these violent crime cases, there are no witnesses. We can settle this legal argument whether these two people came in contact. And so we find the truth and present that truth, and it feels good that we believe that justice is done.
Prosecutors knew that Gerald Powers watched Shannon Sanderson play blackjack and followed her to the cashier's window where she cashed in her chips for $5,000 in cash. Prosecutors believe Powers followed Shannon for 45 minutes as she drove to the babysitter's house to pick up her children. When she got out of her car, Powers knocked her unconscious, then threw her into the car. No one knows where he went. But at some point, he killed Shannon with a .25 caliber pistol, stole her casino winnings and jewelry, then disposed of her body in an abandoned farmhouse.
He knew at that time he was not going to let Shannon live because of his previous encounters that he had attempted to abduct women, and they had lived to identify him.
In December of 1998, Gerald Powers was convicted of Shannon Sanderson's murder and was sentenced to death.
And the forensic proof in this case was overwhelming and compelling. And there was a juror after this was all over who told us that they couldn't help but get caught up in the wave of evidence that we created from the very first witness until the very last, and that we left them no choice but to find Gerald Lee Powers guilty as charged.
That fiber in that dress put her in that car, and that was the icing on the cake. It would probably have been hard to convince 12 people that he actually committed the murder without that fiber.
The biggest employer in Grand Junction, Colorado, isn't the ski industry or the wineries that have sprouted up over the last dozen or so years. Surprisingly, it's the local school district. Dennis Lamb was a vocational teacher in the district's career center.
I taught computer applications, computer repair, and video production. It's mainly for students who did not fit in the mainstream of the academics for whatever reason.
On a February evening in 1991, Dennis and his co-workers attended a vocational awards banquet in the convention center in downtown Grand Junction. Afterwards, as they walked to their cars in an underground parking lot, there was a deafening explosion.
I thought I'd been shot. I was hit in the lower leg.
The explosion was a bomb detonated about 30 yards away. A piece of shrapnel had ripped